Alright, so we've got the tree frog here, and we'll put some basic specs up on screen now so we don't waste your time just reading off a list of specs that you can find on the website as well. But we're going to take a look at what is included here, what you get in this kit. We're going to look at the physical design of the light itself, things like screw threads, buttons, dials, overall design physically. And then we will also, of course, turn it on. We'll show you how to control the different things that are built into here. We'll show you what is built into here in terms of functions and features and what it can do. And then we will also take some readings with the Sekonic C800 to check things like CRI, SSI, light quality, as well as the power, the light output, at some different color temperatures compared to other similar lights on the market. And we'll see if this is a light worth considering. First up, we've got the instruction manual, which a lot of this I've already put on screen, so I'll put that aside. Then we've got a nice little case, which is kind of semi-hard. It's pretty protective enough for sure. Inside of that, on one side, we have this little net where, of course, you could store whatever you want. But right now, we have the silicone diffuser in here. And you can see that's just pretty standard. It's not that deep, so we will see how it affects the actual quality of the light output as well as the color and the intensity in just a moment. We'll do that in the section with the other light tests. On the back, it has some Velcro straps to attach this to the light. Usually, these are just stretchy extensions of that silicone body that will loop around the light. These are actual Velcro straps, which is interesting. We'll see if I actually like that or not. I feel like it does leave these little areas where it's hooked on more vulnerable to rip under wear and tear compared to just having one solid unit where it just loops around the body. You also do get a grid in here. Now having a grid is great to control the light spill. Again, we will show you an example of how this affects the light output and also the spill of the light, how it controls that beam angle and concentrates it a bit more. And then we've got, of course, the light itself, and you can see here there is no frosted diffusion panel on the front of here like you do get with some of these types of lights. The upside of that means that you're going to get a little bit more output, maybe a little bit more kick when you want it. But the downside, of course, is that this is going to be even more susceptible to that multiple source, multiple shadow effect that you get from LED panels without the diffusion. So we'll see if this is effective enough to actually cut that multiple shadow effect out or not. It should be, but even those other lights that do have a diffusion or a frosted glass or plastic on the front typically still do suffer from that anyway, and they do need additional diffusion to get rid of it. So I think that they maybe made a good choice here by just going straight clear to get the most maximum output when you need it. We'll take a look at the details of this design a little bit more in just a second. Now under that in the case, I like that it's not just a big empty space that's squished underneath the light that you have to kind of throw everything in. There is actually dedicated cutouts for things like the USB charging cable you get here, the adapter USB-C to USB-A, I believe it's called. I always forget the names of these things, but a standard USB. Now this is going to be great because this can be used as a power bank. It does have USB power output, and things like standard phone charging cables, for example, usually have this standard USB plug on one end. So that helps because you don't need to have a cable that has a USB-C connection. And then finally, we've got this little cold shoe ball head, and this is small, but it's decent feeling. It's got little rubber rings for friction all around it. It's got grips so you can get everything nice and tight. And it does have a cold shoe on the bottom if you want to put this on top of a camera, or if you want to put it on any other kind of cold shoe mount on a cage or things like that. And if you remove this little cold shoe at the bottom, you do then have a female 1/4-inch screw thread if you want to put this on top of a light stand, for example, or some other kind of mounting situation. One more thing to note here is that you can see in this cutout, it looks like it's pretty clearly made for a little mini tripod. And on the list in the instructions or the manual, the user manual here, it does list that this should come with a little mini tripod, and I didn't get one. I don't know if that depends on where you get it from. This was sent to me from Digitalfoto, so perhaps they just didn't include one in the one that they sent to me. But it's weird because this case is obviously made for that. Just wanted to point that out. All right, so now let's take a look at the light itself. And of course, the headline feature here is that it is IP67 waterproof, which is great and interesting because it doesn't actually have little covers for things like the USB ports. So it's still going to maintain that IP67 waterproof design, which is pretty great. Also, this does have a magnet in the back, which is nice, but I found that the magnet is a little bit weak compared to the size and the weight of the body. So if you do slap it like underneath something that's completely flat, like the underside of a shelf, it does hold it there. But from what I found on vertical surfaces, even the side of that same shelf, which is flat enough, I think, in something that's reasonable to expect to be able to put this on magnetically, it just slides down under the weight. It doesn't hold itself in place. Of course, it's the same for a round C stand, for example. So I do wish that these companies that are putting these magnets into their little pocket lights would think about that and put strong enough magnets to hold the light in place in a variety of different surfaces. Now on the top, you've got 3 buttons, and you can see by the labeling on the back, that's the power button, and a plus and minus for dimming the light, the intensity of the output. On this side here, together with that 5-volt output, this is for the power bank function 5-volt output, you have 4 more buttons, and again, with the labels on the back, you can see M for mode, that's going to switch between your HSI color and special effects mode. You have your function button here, so in modes like the HSI mode where you have multiple parameters you can adjust, hue and saturation for example, that's going to jump between those things that you can make adjustments with, and then you have an up and down arrow to make adjustments to those settings. Again, remember we've got this 5-volt output here that you can use together with that adapter we talked about, and this is a 5-volt 2.2 amp output, which is pretty nice. You've also got the USB in here on the bottom, so if you're charging the built-in battery for this light, that's going to be the USB-C port on the bottom here. And while we're looking at the bottom, you see we also have 2 1/4-20 screw threads, and we do have one more on the side here. So lots of mounting points, and I really appreciate that. The light itself, besides the front panel, is made from metal. It feels robust and it feels well made. Very good in the hand. It's a good size. It's maybe on the larger side of the range of these pocket lights. It's definitely not one of the smaller ones, but it's a good size for sure, and it looks like it should have a pretty strong output because the lack of diffusion on the front there, that's cutting that down from the get-go, and also because of the size itself. Before we check things like output, CRI, SSI, things like that though, let's power this on and just take a quick look at how these controls work and what functions are built into this. Alright, so hold down the power button for a few seconds and it will turn on. It does take a few seconds, it's not instantaneous. There you go. We're in scene mode now. We're going to jump over to CCT mode just to start out. Now in CCT mode, it's very simple. You see your color temperature and your intensity. Color temperature you can adjust with these arrows here. It goes from 2500K up to 8500K in 100K jumps. So decent enough amount of control. But as you can see, when you hold these buttons down, maybe it's faster than clicking it one by one, but it's not that fast of an adjustment when you hold these down. So if you're going from one extreme to the other, it is gonna take a few seconds. I wish that it went just a little bit faster in making those large jumps. Dim, of course, works as you'd expect, and you can go all the way down to 1%. So if you need just a little tiny kick of light in a dark scene, you can do that. Now the order of the modes on here is a little bit different. Usually after CCT mode, when you switch to the next mode, it's going to be your color mode. It's not here, it's your scene mode. And we have 20 scenes built into here. You can press the function button to switch between those, or use the up and down arrows. Either way, it's going to switch between those 20 different modes, and you have numbers as well as little icons here to tell you what those different modes are. We're not going to go super in depth taking a deep look at each one of these because they're pretty standard. The thing that I found interesting here is that you do have control over the intensity. You can turn the intensity down or up, but it doesn't display that percentage on screen, which is kind of weird. So you can dim it, but you can't see how dim it is, which is kind of strange. And also there's no control over the speed of these effects, which I would like to see. Not a huge deal, I guess, and it's not something you see in every light anyway, but it's not here. Pushing M again, we will jump into our HSI mode. You can see here there's a little arrow now pointing at S for saturation. I'm going to bump that up to 100. And you can see now if I go to 100 and continue going, it will jump back around, loop around to 0. So it will loop around at the end, which is, I guess, good because as you can see, if I try to go from 0 up to 100% by holding it down, again, we suffer from that fairly slow movement. It takes a while to get there. But again, because it does loop around, be careful that you don't go past it when you're trying to boost this up to 100% saturation. Anyway, pushing the function button, you can see the arrow will jump over to H for hue, and then you can loop around here again. That slow scroll through all 360 degrees of color is a little bit painful, to be honest with you. And also something to note that when the intensity is pretty low, right now it's at 4%, you might have noticed as I'm scrolling through here, the gradations between colors is not incredibly smooth. So if I pump that up, then this is going to be blown out. But if you pump it up to a higher intensity, then you're going to get smoother gradations in between those RGB colors, the diodes that you have on here physically putting out light. It's just easier to mix them. But keep in mind that if you have this on a low intensity, the quality of the color, the smoothness of that full 360 degrees range of color is going to be a little bit more limited. Fairly typical. You see that on a lot of these lights, so don't worry about it too much. And that's it. We're back to CCT mode. The results with the Sekonic C800 were a little bit mixed. I found at 2500K the reading was very accurate. The light actually put out 2562K, but when you bumped it up to 5500K, it was only putting out 4769. So the actual output was fairly far off from the displayed value, and I don't like when lights do that. It makes it harder to mix them and to set them so that way it matches your camera's white balance. The CRI was pretty solid, hovering around 94 or 95, but the SSI, which was 80 at 2500K, jumped down to 69 at 5500K. Not the best results that I've seen for SSI. And while there was a slight magenta shift down at 2500K, it gets stronger at daylight and up at the higher end of the range. In terms of brightness though, this does put out a lot of light. It's brightest at daylight, where it puts out 2150 lux at 50 centimeters. At the 2500 end of the range, it jumps down to about 15 or 1600 lux. This is definitely on the higher end of pocket lights, but that diffusion does cut down the output quite a bit. For example, it cuts it down to 695 lux at 2500K and 940 lux at 5500K. That diffusion does also pull down the color temperature a bit, so with the diffusion at 2500K, the setting of 2500K on the light, you get 2365K, and at 5500 it goes from 4769, which we saw before, down to 4006K, or basically 4000K. It does also seem to have an issue with flicker at lower intensities, at 5% for example. I could very soon see an issue with the flicker at 2/50th of a second, 3/20th of a second, anything like that. Even fairly low settings that you might use if you're filming in slow motion, that flicker was visible. Up to 10%, the problem did get better. So overall, this is a cool light. It's nice that you can use it underwater, but I was let down in a few areas. One, the flicker at low intensities. Two, the lack of a mobile app, which I didn't even mention. There is no mobile app for this light as far as I can tell. Three, the color output was a little bit inaccurate to the color that is displayed on screen in the CCT mode. And four, the magnet was just not up to snuff in order to hold this light in a useful way in enough of a variety of different applications, enough different surfaces that I really feel like it would be very useful as an add-on, as an extra feature that's built into this. But it is very bright, and it does have that IP67 rating, which those two things combined can make this a very useful light for a lot of different applications. So it may not be the most well-rounded light, but it can do some things very, very well. So let me know down below what you think. If you think that that trade-off, that balance for this price, which I will put up on screen, is a good enough value for you, and if this is a light that you would be interested in and how you want to use it, if that IP67 rating is the key point, if the brightness is the key point, or the price is the key point, whatever else it is that may be motivating you to choose this light or not to choose it. I'm curious to hear. I'm sorry, I'm rambling. Let's finish this up. If you're still with me after all my rambling, thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions or comments, let me know down there. I'll do my best to get back to you, and as always, thank you for watching.